Hello everyone, Whitebox here, and today I'm starting a new series. I'm going to take a look at each adversary, talking about their additional loss conditions, escalations, and level rules, and then discuss some basic strategies that can help against them for each of the 5 pillars of play: offense, control, fear, defense, and finally utility. And I'm going to start with England. England is a very difficult adversary. It was originally planned as difficulty 10 at its highest level, but now Spirit Island has been out for a while, and players and designers have a better handle on how things work, so England is generally considered to be difficulty 11 at level 6. So how did England get here? Here being this alternative history of the 1700 CE world that Spirit Island takes place in. Queen Elizabeth I of England married Robert Dudley, son of the Duke of Northumberland, in 1562. The marriage was initially a scandal due to the suspicious circumstances surrounding the death of Dudley's first wife, and inspired a revolt of several noble houses. However, the co-monarchs Robert I and England I grew in popularity after the suppression of the revolt in 1564 and the birth of their son Edward in 1566. With the defeat of an attempted invasion from Spain and Scotland in 1587, the Kingdom of England became one of the premier naval powers in the North Atlantic. After the death of Robert in 1588 and Elizabeth in 1603, their son Edward VII became King of England. England was only briefly involved in the religious wars on the continent in the 17th century. Following a disastrous invasion attempt in France in 1633 and a clash with Scotland in 1651, the Kingdom of England focused on fortifying the Scottish frontier and building up its naval power. Unable to project power on the continent and constrained to southern Britain, the Kingdom of England was one of the first to seek colonies in the New World, using its overseas possessions to provide citizens with opportunities that were increasingly hard to come by at home. More than other adversaries, England is designed around establishing a permanent colony on the island, and that can be seen in their additional loss condition, proud and mighty capital. If 7 or more towns or cities are ever in a single land, the invaders win. A lot of England's additional rules mess with the build economy of the game, so the puzzle lies in stopping them from reaching a 7 building land. England games tend to be very long because it's difficult to clear them completely from the island, and because they don't remove any extra invader cards. They start a little bit slow in Stage 1, which can give spirits a chance for greedy plays early on, but by Stage 2 they are a real menace. The Stage 2 escalation is Building Boom. On each board with towns or cities, build in the land with the most towns or cities. When you're in Stage 2 against England, you don't want to leave lands with 6 towns or cities because you risk losing right away to the escalation build. I find that it's nice having multiple lands with the same number of buildings so you can choose which one gets that escalation build. Letting a land build that's not at risk of building again that turn or the next can buy you nice time. Level 1 England has indentured servants earn land. Invader build actions affect lands without invaders if they are adjacent to at least 2 towns or cities before the build action. This rule makes it very difficult to break the explore, build, ravage action chain of England, because even if you get rid of the explorer, they might just build anyway depending on the adjacent lands. And England 1 is considered difficulty 3. Level 2 brings criminals and malcontents. During setup, on each board add 1 city to land number 1 and 1 town to land number 2. This rule makes it harder to avoid the level 1 effect, since the board starts with more building adjacencies, and of course there's more stuff that you have to get rid of. England 2 is difficulty 4. At level 3 you get High Immigration. Put the High Immigration tile on the invader board to the left of Ravage. The invaders take this build action each invader phase before ravaging. Cards slide left from Ravage to it, and from it to the discard pile. Remove the tile when a Stage 2 card slides onto it, putting that card in the discard. This doubles the number of builds that England gets, and is especially dangerous because they can build, then ravage in the same turn, like if you have a Stage 1 wetlands in the High Immigration tile, and a Stage 2 wetlands in the ravage spot. Sometimes that forces you to defend empty lands rather than put your resources elsewhere, and this increases the difficulty up to 6. At level 4, the High Immigration tile stays out the entire game, so you don't have any relief halfway through Stage 2 like you do with England 3. This bumps the difficulty up to 7. And then the level 5 rule, Local Autonomy, gives towns and cities plus 1 health, so 3 health for towns, 4 health for cities. I'll talk more about it when I get to basic strategy, but this rule is very polarizing, and it makes the matchup incredibly difficult for some spirits, while not affecting others much at all. Level 5 is considered difficulty 9. And finally, there is independent resolve at level 6. During setup, add an additional fear to the fear pool per player in the game. During any invader phase where you resolve no fear cards, perform the build from high immigration twice. This has no effect if no card is in the extra build slot, which is the case early on, or with certain fear cards. The number of fear cards actually goes down at this level, but with the extra fear in the fear pool, it takes 65 fear per player to reach a fear victory instead of 56 at level 5. Fear management is very important against England 6. You want to make sure that there's always a fear card generated before the invader phase so that you can stop that extra build from happening. So that's how England works. Now I'm going to talk about some basic strategies and a few spirits that employ them well. As a very general strategy, England starts slow, so you do have some time early on to either be greedy and grow quickly, or try to keep them down before they get too out of hand. Major powers tend to be pretty good against England since it is likely that there will be a lot of built-up lands, so prioritizing an early major to play around is a good idea. Something that does a lot of fear and damage like sea monsters can be great, especially since it scales throughout the game. Jungle Hungers is nice as well, since it has destruction instead of damage, so it bypasses the extra health from England 5. And if you get lucky enough to grab Paralyzing Fright, do it. It's amazing most of the time, but against England it will frequently skip 2 actions, and sometimes 3. A lot of people like playing against England because the games go long, and let your spirits grow to their full potential. Just be ready for a war of attrition. The first pillar of play to talk about is offense. Offensive spirits can be very good against lower levels of England because you have a lot of targets to destroy and generate fear. England 5 is where you get a big split. Spirits with destroy effects, like Ocean, Lightning, and Thunder Speaker, don't care about the extra building health at all, because destruction ignores health. Spirits that rely on damage, like Wildfire, struggle a lot because the damage is balanced around towns having 2 health and cities having 3. For damage spirits to do well against England, you need overwhelming damage, like you can get from Stone, Keeper, or Vengeance. You need to weigh when to strike as well, especially against level 6 England when managing fear becomes really important. Next is Control. Traditionally, Control is about pushing or pulling invaders or Dahan, but it can also mean isolations, action skips, or downgrading invaders. Traditional pushing and pulling of invaders is very weak against England. You can't stack up too many towns and cities in one land for a big hammer later on because of Proud and Mighty Capital, and you can rarely stop builds by moving explorers because of indentured servants earn land. Spirits that rely on control like this are going to struggle against England, and it gets even worse at high levels. The big hammers that they swing to clear lands are less effective against the extra health of England 5, and they won't be generating enough fear to deal with England 6. River is the main victim here, but you can also include Sunbright Whirlwind and Finder as control spirits that suffer. Moving Dahan around can still be effective for counterattacks, and isolations are great for stopping those empty land builds, so a spirit that can do both, like Downpour, can do well. As for action skips, skipping explorers doesn't matter much against England, but skipping builds can be very useful, like you have from Green or Rising Heat. Fear is very important against England for 2 reasons. At all levels, England is difficult to wipe off the island completely, so you usually need to push the terror level to win. And with England 6 specifically, getting at least 5 fear per player per turn is incredibly important to stop double builds. I think Bringer of Dreams and Nightmares does well into England just because of the overwhelming amount of fear that you can generate, but most other fear spirits need some other strong suit to work, like Many Minds has defense. A spirit like Shadow's Flicker Like Flame that relies on fear and explorer control, which doesn't work against England at all, is going to struggle. Next is defense. Defense by itself won't work because if you stall too much, England is just going to build up a proud and mighty capital. If you compare defense with fear and Dahan counterattacks like Many Minds, Eyes Watch from the Trees, or Green, you can do very well. A defense spirit like Earth or Memory has a harder time because they rely on getting good majors to deal with England. Majors are fine against England, but if that's the whole game plan of the spirit, it can fall flat if you don't get enough big hitting majors in time. Blight removal also falls under the defense category, but I don't think it's that necessary against England. With England, you're usually worried about the additional loss condition rather than blighting out. And finally, utility. Utility mostly refers to how spirits help each other, but it also deals with things like manipulating the invader, event, or fear decks. I think those abilities can be very nice to have against England. Some events add extra builds or buildings, and knowing that ahead of time or just shuffling that card to the bottom is great, so Fracture Days can shine in this matchup. For each of these adversary overviews, I'll end by mentioning what I think are the three best spirits against the adversary, as well as the three worst, so you know who to play or avoid if you're having any trouble. One of the best spirits against England is Fathomless Mud of the Swamp. It has control that actually works against England by turning builds into extra explorers. It has good steady fear generation, and it has good energy income to get major powers and take down built up lands easily. Another is Many Minds Move as One. It has some of the best, most consistent fear generation in the game, has good defense and Jahan movement to set up counterattacks, and it has action skips to stop plenty of builds. You can certainly go for major powers, and there are a couple different builds for Many Minds that do that, but you don't even need to as this spirit, and you can still do pretty well against England, at all levels. And my third pick is Lightning. It's the classic England counter since it uses destruction instead of damage for offense, and you can even use the immense aspect and sling major powers to make this matchup even easier. The first spirit I'd avoid against England is Heart of the Wildfire. Wildfire is balanced around the fact that towns take 2 damage to destroy, and it can start doing that just from growth on turn 2. It actually does just fine against England up until level 5, when that extra building health just ruins your entire game plan. You can't kill towns with growth until turn 5 at the earliest now, and most likely you'll have a few reclaims to make that turn 7 instead. You just can't get ahead of England in tempo, and it becomes a miserable time trying to do anything to them. Next is River Surges in Sunlight. Even at low levels, England is just a frustrating matchup because your control doesn't work. You can't stop builds, and you can't push everything into one land, otherwise you'll just hit that special loss condition. Then you hit England 5, and you can't even wipe out a land with massive flooding. And finally, avoid Shadow's Flicker like Flame. Shadows has a few tools that do okay into England, like good fear and the ability to downgrade towns or cities, but Explorer control is useless, and your bad tracks make it difficult to go into major powers instead. So that's it for England. Let me know if there are any changes that you'd like me to make to this format before I get into the next adversary, which is either going to be Sweden or Brandenburg Prussia. Thank you for watching, and as always, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. I'll see everybody next week.